I moved my studio into the Baltimore Museum of Art and made a new film, a new video every day. And so there's all these great stories because people would come through and I'd be like, you sing this line and you read this and, draw this for me. So then I'll get to talk. But I want to talk a little bit right now because it just occurred to me that I wrote a review the other day. I don't usually write movie reviews, but I wrote a review for Talkhouse Film, that magazine, and it was about a documentary called Approaching the Elephant. And the the editor seems like a really nice person and, liked it, but he's like, he took out a big chunk about Adam Phillips, who is a psychoanalyst and an essayist who I'm really into. And just about everything I write these days is like, and Adam Phillips, and it's just sort of like a diving board into something. But he said, I took them out, not because they were not germane or interesting, but because he didn't use the word germane, but because it just seemed a little too academic for our audience. And then I was like, fine, your world, and I'm, no movie reviewer. But then that night, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, well, wait a minute. So I sent him this other thing that I had just written for Art 21 magazine, where I do these sort of slideshow things. It's just like an advertisement for other things I do, it seems like. I forgot about Denzel Washington's teeth. Such like I should have another credit. But Spike Lee puts music over every single, there's not one moment that's not pure music. But everything else about it was so great. So good.
Not because, but even though, but the way you said it, but everything else was
everything
really
about the movie is so nice.
Except for
that he puts music over every single scene. Yeah,
Tell me about the need for you to end your film with the music, with that song.
Well, the very last, it actually ends with the other part of the
monarch story, but just before that.
Yeah. So for me, that is, she just comes home, and he's been in the woods recording that all day. That song is what was just sounds that I recorded in the woods and had the actor, recreate. And like most of us do, when you've had a hard day, just go home and listen to music and dance for a long time, like dance of joy and sorrow and anger, and then just silly, and then sort of death. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just goes on a little too long, which is nice.
Why do you like going on a little too long?
I think that, it just takes a little while for things to float out. Are we going to do it like this? I feel awkward about this because then I'm like, wait, am I talking to you? And then I'm going to look at you.
Answer to them.
Well, Adam.
Answer to them. I'm just the voice in your head asking you questions. Yes, exactly.
I think...
and then we'll take questions from them in just a minute. I start with
just
a couple.
for thinking about that. I go back and forth on whether or not I actually think that's too long. But when I was making it, I wanted it to go for quite a long time. I also think the woman that plays the writer, Kim Sue Tyler, is a really extraordinary dancer. And to me, she's just incredibly watchable. And where the dance goes and the sort of inventiveness, the change that comes from just sort of stretching or moving around in your backyard to really her listening to the music is this sort of reversal of what's been happening all day, is this sort of, this other kind of listening. So all of a sudden she's sort of expressing, when she's listening to the podcast and jogging, there's this physicality, but she's so sort of beholden to the text, and her responses are from the text. And then in that space, she's getting to work with the musician in a way.
So let's go back one, and we'll deal with one or two questions I guess that you raise in the dialogue. I mean, for me, the film's sort of like this, in large part, sort of a Socratic dialogue on art. But for you going back, like, what did it take for you, or how did you come to decide to expand your scale to make a longer film?
Yeah. So, right, in the dialogue, there's this question of scale. And that was a little bit of a joke to me, and maybe you as well. Yeah, I just felt like I wanted to have something move at a slower rate. It's a hard question to ask because it supposes that everybody knows my other work, but a lot of my other work has been short, poetic, sort of a lot of language-based, but much more like encapsulated work. And so then this is this sort of drawn out space, and also has actors, which I don't really employ that much. They're not getting a lot of my work from me. You guys in LA know that. Like, don't try. Yeah, and originally I was writing that dialogue to be just a dialogue for this epic woods collage that I've been making for years. But then I just really wanted to work with actors, and I wanted to see people embody language. So fun to see somebody read your words, and particularly the woman, Flora, who plays the artist, is a longtime stage actress. Yeah, she's amazing. She's and mostly an experimental theater actress. She actually started she worked for a long time with a place in Milwaukee called Theater X. Was that the name of it? And she just, her fluidity and like way that she owns those words, it was just kind of a thrill for me writing. And then all of a sudden to have her employ pauses in this really miraculous way. Like, I know that she's kind of forgotten the line, but it's worked so elegantly into the way that she delivers the line that it was just sort of a treat for me to see that. So part of it was just kind of, we want to change our game as artists and like play a little bit differently. And then, to see how something would unfold in that way.
Did seeing them embody it also then lead you to change languages, change the script? Did it keep going back and forth, or did you really like stay with did you stick with filming the script you had written? Or did the embodiment of it lead you to
every
change
single
the
thing is scripted. Yeah, I'm so uptight. There's not one, like there's ums written. Yeah, and they'd say it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is that what you mean? Like,
well, that was part of it, but also when you were rehearsing with them, when they were embodying it, then did you also make changes for them to that they might have done them exactly, but
I took out one line in when editing, but no. Flora was in Milwaukee, and Kim Soo, who plays the writer, was in New York. So what they did was send me sound recordings of them reading, and I would make notes to them about that, but none of the text was changed. Not that I wouldn't do that in the future, but maybe the first time I'm working in this way. Yeah.
How did you know Kim Soo?
So Kim Soo I've known my whole life. Yeah, since I was a child. Yeah.
And she also then a dancer.
She's an artist and a dancer. Mm-hmm. But primarily she's a visual artist and a conceptual artist, and she also makes films and videos.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so also first at this point, anybody? Please, Dana.
Hi. First, congratulations on such a terrific piece.
Oh, thank you so much.
I really wondered who is the artist? Is she inspired by an actual person, or because it seems to me you're too young to write such a part.
Mm-hmm. Ah, thank you. I think that's a nice compliment.
Yeah.
I don't mean about the young. I don't think it's a compliment to be young. Like I am embodying a character that I might not have direct experience with, which is a hard thing to do.
I also wondered if those artworks are inventions of yours.
They're all inventions, and the story is inventions. So some of them, when you say who is the artist, there's a game that I'm playing where, I obviously don't have the finances to make the hologram piece. And so in a way I've sort of like patented those. Mm. When I was a kid I thought it was the most miraculous thing, like you could just write an invention, but if you mailed it away and had it mailed back to you, then like, I don't know if that was just an urban myth, but that was how you could patent something. So in a way I feel like I've already made those pieces. Magnetic Hotel, and I've really wanted to do that for a long time. But now I did it. You guys all get it, and you're like, yeah, that would be nice. I would like to feel that. That's enough. But yeah, so she is just made up character. But some of those are sort of wish fulfillment. But all, I feel like all characters are just, little bits of ourselves or people that we know or people that we wish existed. She is so, that character is so sort of generous. I mean, she has this point where she stops, she's not very, she doesn't accept all of the writers moving off into this kind of personal space. And yeah, that might be a little bit like my grandfather in a way. It's like, okay, enough nonsense. But she's also in some ways very generous. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Congratulations on your film. I really loved it.
Thank you.
And I just had a few-
Are you reading that?
What?
I thought you were reading that.
I'm reading
Congratulations.
I'm reading my phone for a few quick questions so I wouldn't forget because I'm bad at like posting.
Oh, neat.
But,
Okay.
so like, do you think people are born daredevils or like made daredevils from the game of like the game speaking, I guess, like societal game of making people want to have to do things all the time?
Yeah.
And then also like, were you proposing an alternative to not play the game or like to kind of like sit out and for people to like find their own path or their own game rather than the one that's been given to them by the society they've been born into? And then, like, do you think someday...
I'm going to have to borrow the phone when you're talking.
I just have one more question.
Yeah.
Do you think someday language will evolve to be more loyal to the subject? Like with the example of perfume and wine being compared to music, do you think that's like a thing that will evolve to become, we'll find different words or better words eventually in the future for to communicate faithfully our ideas? And then I also just wanted to thank you for putting the value back on the process and rather than just like the business of things, because like I'm an independent filmmaker and I'm like I related a lot to what that lady said about like not being very like self-promotive and stuff, but how it's just important just to make something, for yourself. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. That's a lot. So the first one...
The first one, like, do you think people are born daredevils?
Oh.
Or they're like kind of like made that way?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think probably a little bit of both, Sometimes people are born daredevils. It's interesting, again, that I was watching the Malcolm X movie, because, I don't know if you read that book, his diary, but yeah, he was just born willful, I think. Obviously his life circumstances also made him willful, but and my older sister was sort of born willful. I don't know if that makes her a daredevil, but people are born, I don't know, all different ways. That's like sort of above my pay grade, and, like anthropologically but certainly people are made daredevils. That's, regardless of whether or not the former can be true. Definitely I think the latter can be true. The second question, the alternative is death, right? That's what that song is about, and that's what, and that's what's happening in the podcast. She thinks for a second like, oh, right, I don't have to. The other thing is I could just not.
Yeah, it's like this feeling of like a pressure cooker is like you sort of like have to perform the stunt. And that stunt can be like interpreted as like many things, just like it could be like working in the world or just like contributing to society in that way. But then the alternative is like you can't really do nothing at all. So it's like it's one or the other. It's like they're daredevil or death,
Yeah.
It's really like profound, and I loved your film.
Oh, thank you so much. And the third one, maybe you just needed to say it. It's nice for everybody just to hear those ideas.
I'm being selfish, but do you think someday language will be more loyal to the subject?
And no, I'm really no. I think that's part of the language is just so labile. I love Wittgenstein's theory of language games, so that any word can figure. If we are, I could be like, if you put the jam of the meaning into that space, like I can use jam in that way, and you know what I mean, more or less. That lability of language has to do with like just our small and large cultures, our micro cultures, and then our literature, our music, every different way that language is used. And it's changing all the time. You know, there's all sorts of semioticians up in arms about text language, and then those people who think it's a really wonderful, creative way to play with language, just rearranging spelling and meaning. But I don't think it will ever be as direct as it could be, and I think that's sort of the fun of language. I'm really interested also in like the work of Helena Cixous, who's like a pretty hardcore feminist who thinks about how language is gendered. And that's a really wonderful, I mean, if you're interested in that sort of idea, like exactly what is language saying aside from the words and the way that we use them.
What was her name?
Cixous, Cixous. E?
Oh, yeah,
No, you just
No,
X.
yeah,
thank you.
thank you. Someone else want to say something?
Please.
There's during the interview section, there's a real therapeutic thing going on there, like a doctor-patient
Yeah.
thing, and especially in the way she cuts her off at the end when the interview's over, and it's like, you know, our time is up.
And it's exactly 50 minutes.
And the patient's reaction is like very familiar. It's this like dawning that there's somebody else waiting outside the door to come in next.
Yeah.
And then her catharsis after the interview on her own, thinking about everything, kind of working her way through it and having the breakdown there. Is this something that you're like familiar with? This is like, you know, how
I had never thought about it like that, but certainly I was thinking about the way like an interview can feel personal or friendly, and in that way, but not necessarily. It does really fit a therapeutic model, and particularly that out in the hallway. I don't have a therapist. I never have good therapists. I've tried here and there, but a couple years ago I was part of a study that Johns Hopkins did called the Spirituality Study. I think I might have told you this. And what it was is that you go every week and talk to these people who are basically like therapists, but they're actually, one was a sociologist and one was a theologist. And they are trying to study, does a daily practice or concerted practice in spirituality make your life better? So you go every week and you meet with these people who are your guides, and they ask you every question, and you fill out all these questionnaires, and you have daily prayer meditation, daily mantra meditation, and then at some point throughout the year, 3 different times throughout the year, you take these really high-dose psilocybin sessions, and you just lie down for 8 hours in this room with headphones, really super high-tech headphones. You can like spatialize. You're like, oh, there's the timpani. And eye shades, and that was sort of like therapy. I was thinking at the time that my experience with the guides was more fruitful and like generous, not in terms of them being generous, although they were, but generous in terms of approaching that methodology. Like, what is that construct, that doctor-patient thing can be kind of fraught with power struggles, and even though I'm a kind of a rebel, but I also have a desire to please, and in those kind of models, you know, or amuse them or something. I think that that felt in a way like therapy. But I wasn't thinking about that when I was writing it, and I really agree with you. But it has a lot of things like friendships or lovers or just interview, and there's something also about that space to just talk about your work, which
also
is
the fact that they're strangers.
Yeah.
It mirrors the practice too.
But that also, and that one, that the writer knows the artist's work, and in a way, ostensibly, you would know, maybe if not that particular therapist's work, they're a Jungian or they're a behaviorist, or you have a sort of familiarity with them that they don't have with you.
The time it breaks down is when the artist tells her that she's read her
Oh, yeah.
material, and that would have been totally...
That would have been like,
yeah.
yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah, right, transgressive therapy. which there was some pretty good transgressive therapy.
In the study you were doing, I mean,
Yeah, that's
but-
pretty interesting. I just tell that.
But
There
then,
you go.
was it separated from the notion of daily practice, just period, not necessarily the spiritual practice, but daily practice, because the practice of a writer or an artist is obviously a very important
Yeah.
activity, and what is the nature of your daily practice then beyond that, does that then also then fulfill a spiritual need
Yeah.
as well?
And actually, that was one of the main things that we would talk about a lot. Like that, I have all throughout my life had a daily practice, but I also have had throughout my life daily spiritual practice. But yeah, that art, and then the trips, the psilocybin trips, were just all about art. I was like, just bawling the whole time, like, Buck, you had to write this so good, like humans, because I can get like pretty cynical sometimes, feel like the humans are bad or scary or something. Be like, but you did that and that was hard, and then, whoa, you guys all had to learn how to play that. That was hard. And then somebody built the room architecturally. You could just keep going, and but it was all about like, everything was about the sort of gratitude of art making as a spiritual practice. Yeah, it was pretty great. Just like talking about drug use. And another time I was.
A step back for the film, how did you end up coming to decide on this sort of structure
This structure.
for the film, and primarily along the arc of the dialogue, but then just, in a way that could be like one thing, and you could say, like, oh, it's like, whatever, My Dinner with Andre or whatever, but obviously it doesn't end up that way,
Right.
or there's more to it that comes, and of course it's sort of that pipe dream, tell me how you thought of that, which of course is not like, so that's not really quite the question, but if you were writing this dialogue, and then what did you think you needed to do to take the characters beyond, or why was the writer the character you needed to follow, not the artist, also
Right.
beyond the film, beyond the discussion?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm not sure I can say quite
Yeah.
well. I mean, structurally, it's primarily thirds with these small interruptions, and I'm really interested in thirds. A lot of my films are thirds. Delta, symbol of change, and haiku. And then even with the small bits of haiku, like Basho used to have these connecting haikus that would go on and on, sort of like Exquisite Corpses, but with himself. So thirds is sort of an obvious, like a space in which I feel comfortable. And then why to follow the writer? I'm not 100% sure, just that I think that I was more interested in seeing the impact of somebody else's ideas and not the person whose ideas we're really reveling in, even though we do hear some of the writer's ideas. Just what is the impact of art? What is that other side, And then when she's listening to the podcast, she's also sort of filtering that notion of daredevilry through just having spoken to the artist about that sort of play. And so, just reacting to what people are doing in the world, her reacting to these other spaces of people making things.
Please.
How come the artist? Wait, no. How come the artist beats herself up and the writer beats herself up, but the musician gets to go out and it's like, whee?
Yeah. Okay, where does the artist beat herself up?
She does not like to ask for money
Right.
and pander.
But then she's just like a big famous star, so she did it at some point.
She seems like she has problems.
You think so? I feel like she's so cool. Like, I wish I could.
I guess I read too
Yeah.
much into it, but it just seems
No,
like
I'm just not. I don't think
she
there's a
has
real right
problems
answer.
And the writer has problems with musicians,
Yeah,
more pure.
Yeah.
somehow.
yeah.
Is that random?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's entirely random, but he's such a, like a smaller character, and he doesn't have any real language. But if you're really thinking about, like, who's messed up, the song he's singing is pretty messed up. And the fact that he just has to say it over and over again, you want to be in love just so you can tell yourself you're not going to die seems like he might have some tension. Maybe, yeah.
In the back.
Two questions. Since you've known Kim Sue Tyler all your life, did you, when you were writing this movie, were you writing it with her in mind to play the part for the whole entire time?
Yes.
And the second thing, and it's not, maybe it's because I'm pregnant, but, and you know, and I'm older in years, so I found it, it struck me when she said, the artist said, and Kim Sue said, I don't remember the line exactly, but about the forgetting to have a baby.
Yes.
You know, and her age.
Yeah.
And, you know, what the I know there's a significance as to why you put that line in there, and I just kind of just was wondering what exactly that is, other than the obvious, which is, you know, she's an older woman, maybe never married and didn't have children.
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Or you can have children without being married, but, you know, besides that, was
Yeah.
there something more, a little deeper into that? Because that just really kind of struck me.
Yeah, I liked that, I wanted to put that line in there because you don't know. And actually that was one of the few times where we had to do that a lot, that take, because I really wanted it to be throwaway because it is so,
Yeah.
you know, potentially heavy. And so Flora, the artist, you know, would have a certain gravitas to it. And I'd be like, no, just, you know, because it's a little bit of a mystery, and I mean, I think that's a nice thing. It's something that I enjoy when I read books where you're not 100% sure where the character is coming from, and not because it's been sloppily composed,
Yeah.
but because humans are, you know, not so clear. So I don't feel like I know exactly whether she rued that choice or whether it was just a sort of offhanded joke. But as far as for me, I didn't. It's not really an issue for me. I don't know if you were like, is that a
If it was more
yeah.
like a social statement.
Yeah, no, I think that, I don't think so. For me, it's just a sort of literary game to play, like having a little bit of like licorice in a
I found it
piece
interesting
of ice
because, you know,
cream.
there are so many women, you know, in midlife, middle-aged women who haven't had children and are totally fine with it. But
Yeah.
society kind of, has frowns upon that in a sense.
Yeah,
You know.
France, or they have those parades.
Yeah.
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 Macy's.
Yeah. So I found that really.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Something that's interesting about the Kim Sue, about writing it, thinking about Kim Sue, so she is a really good friend of mine for my whole life, and I was writing, and she's one of the most like brilliant people you'll ever meet, but she could not memorize anything, like the littlest bit, like, you know, just two or three lines. I mean, she's truly just so stunningly smart in a lot of different kinds of ways. But that was really an interesting thing for learning about directing, is that Flora was so professional. She had that entire thing memorized, and that's a lot of words.
Yeah.
You know that James Brown, there's a lot of words in there, young man, I can't swing it. But she could, and Kim Sue would just go blank. So she's so much more cut up, in the editing, and which was really rough, puzzling-wise, but works out well. Like there's a bit of a like stagger and tension to her motions and her movements that seem to fall all right with the character of the writer. But yeah, it was nice to think about her. And then the woman that played Flora, the woman that played the artist, I was originally throughout the whole thing imagining it to be Susan Howe, who is the woman who reads the voiceover, and she's a really wonderful writer, a theoretician, and a poet who I've loved since I was in high school. She was sort of the first writer I ever read who worked deconstructing structure. You know, like I was, into strange writers like Genet, or like perverts or something. And then Susan Howe did this like completely deconstructive work, and it was really impactful to me, and I've been a really big fan of hers. And she's also stunning looking. She's really gorgeous, looks like a bird if Samuel Beckett was a bird. And I was sort of picturing her. So then when it turned out that she was not she was like, I can't do this. I'm not an actress. And I don't think I knew what I was asking.
Yeah.
It's like, you just remember it, and then you just say it. It's all on the text. And then I was so thankful to have Flora, because she just sort of opened that up and taught me so much about, what you're even looking at when you're thinking about an actor and dialogue. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I was just wondering about the line where she said, like, well, I think that may be a bit naive of you. That seemed like
I think
there
that
was
question is
an-
younger than perhaps you are.
What?
I think that question is perhaps younger than you are. Yeah.
Yeah.
More naive,
And
yeah.
is that what it was?
Mhm.
She was saying.
But no, it's the same, what you're saying, I'm just reminding myself. I'm sorry I wasn't correcting you.
Yeah, and like I felt like that part, that like moment had a kind of significance, and there was like some tension between the characters. Like,
Yeah.
I just wanted to like ask you about that and like kind of like what they were like saying.
I think, yeah, she was being scolded a little. Yeah.
She was saying like don't ask questions that are like too wise for you, like your age.
She was saying, that's dumb. She was being scolded. She's kind of softens it, but that's what, she's like a little bit, she was like, that's a little, you're being sort of faux naive, or, like she's just was a little disappointed in that question. It's part of a little bit of
Yeah, I also
tension.
wanted to comment like the writer seemed very natural within her. She seemed like realistically nervous and stuff,
Mhm,
and I
yeah.
felt like very believable. Like it seemed like from her point, it seemed like a real interview.
Yeah. I think Also, I don't know, there's a lot to say about acting. It's so new for me. One of the things is that they both are so ridiculously beautiful that just like you forget, like, oh yeah, just watching somebody. I'm always sort of down on beauty, like whatever somebody looks like, that has nothing to do with how neat they are to talk to or how funny or, what they make. But then with actors, you're just looking at their faces, and Kim Soo, like gets flustered or as both the writer and the actress maybe loses her line, but then she just does this smile, and it's like all is forgiven. It's just like this so illuminating.
That's also something that I think in a way is just characteristic of people you see on a big screen
Yeah.
all the time anyway. It's
They-
like, even if they can look almost like anything in the world,
Right.
but it's just like, people are amazing to look at when they're
Right.
there.
That's true. Right. So you're saying it's not that they're just stunning.
I mean, they're
Yeah,
beautiful too,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's also just I guess I'm like wanting to phase over to a question of like
Yeah,
the
screens
screen and
change.
scale, and
Mhm.
the notion of like writing a dialogue for a screen
Yeah.
is very different from writing it for a stage.
Or in my experience would be a book.
Mhm.
To have that. I don't write a lot of stage pieces. But absolutely that would be really different. But that's maybe more of a, well, I don't know really, but I would think that would be more the domain of the actor, because it's such a different way that you perform when you're on a stage than a screen. But I think that probably what the writer does can be less would need to change for screens or stage. I don't know, I'm just making that up. I haven't written too many Broadway plays yet, but I'm like just guessing.
When she's on the treadmill, are you purposefully making it difficult for us to watch her so that we watch the racquetball game?
Yeah. Well, it's
Because
just
I couldn't watch her at all, and then I
because of the
couldn't-
eyes
yeah,
or
and then
because
I
of the
couldn't
pain on her
hear
face?
her, and then I was like in the game, and then I was like, they're not really swinging at the ball, and then I was like criticizing the game, and then I was expecting so much.
Like something was
Because
gonna
I don't know anything
happen.
about your work, but I was expecting to be tricked. And so when we got to her on the treadmill, I thought, because your sound design in the beginning of like people in the background, I started listening to see if I was supposed to be listening,
Mhm.
because the conversation got so like, what? Like between the two of them, and then it started going back towards the interviewer. She started getting really personal. So then I started like racking my hearing to some of the design, and I was like, no, I don't think we're supposed to be hearing that. But then when we got on the treadmill, I was like, okay, we are supposed to be watching this racquetball game. But it's sort of like you hallucinating in your spiritual thing. Like you
Yeah.
start to not know what you're like you start to see the room and you start to wonder where you're supposed to be.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I
Yeah.
was, I
I
got
think
stuck on
I
that.
was very excited about that. I was really into miking that, all of it, but that scene in particular. I have these really gorgeous C42, these Josephson mics that are just these kind of gorgeous field mics, and like a PZM on the floor, and then something under the treadmill, under the, what is that called? Treadmill. And yeah, just that back and forth.
'Cause it was the music
against
that
her.
changed the music that was
Yeah,
also
there's
in
just
the
a little
woods.
bit of music on the podcast,
But more rhythmically, I mean, music. in
Right,
terms
and
of,
that's
like,
what I
being
was
in the
really
woods and
interested
having
in.
the racking of focus.
yeah,
and
the
belief
contrast
and-
between her jogging pace and their playing pace. But I am not a sports person, so what happened was they play quite badly, but I didn't know that, and I didn't. And like my friend was like, God, it's distracting. They're just so bad. And I was like, oh, 'cause in my head it was just like boom, 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 and
Right,
then
well, you
the
heard just
daredevil
the
is on
sounds.
dangling from the
Right.
bridge. You know, it's all imagined. And then I was like, oh yeah, look at that. They're running like, this is like Joan's ass trying to grab the ball. But you know, it's
Well, they're
like
not
really
really
excited
playing,
by
they're
the
just
sound.
volleying.
Well, they
Anyway,
are
but-
really playing. They are trying to play.
Right,
They just
she
aren't
like
very
hits
good.
it twice. Like I was like, okay, so they're just volleying. So it's just my own distraction of
Yeah,
because I couldn't
because you're a
watch
big
her.
squash player. That's
Yeah.
good. It's good for your heart. Yeah, it's squash and not racquetball. That's the other thing. I wrote racquetball in the titles. It's squash. People have told me this in Q&As. I believe that was squash. Like, what
Next
do you
time,
mean?
badminton.
Badminton, I know, right? A little quieter,
Don't get
but
confused with
but
that.
sonically, I mean, you can imagine what I was trying to go. How good it could.
Just to add a little bit to like your experience of like the divorce between those like how to navigate that space. I think also a lot of it like can you talk about lighting that a little bit, just like on a practical level?
That was really hard to light that, and I wish it were a little bit nicer. The other pieces were also hard to light. Like the cafe setting is my storefront, and I actually put in a window. Like I tore down the wall and put in that giant window, and then there's just this bank of lights on the other side to fill it in. But I just didn't have that time, and again, it's not my.
So you're not happy with the lighting in that scene?
I'm not. Yeah, I wouldn't allow it to be if I was totally disappointed, but I do wish it were a little better. And if I had my druthers and the budget to be not doing the lighting myself, it would be better. Yeah.
Why did you choose to have in the cafe to have the blown out?
But
window
that was
behind them?
purposeful. That's absolutely
obviously.
yeah.
So I'm wondering
Yeah.
why you
Because
chose
I'm
that.
a religious freak.
Mm-hmm. It happens.
Yeah. Just the
And-
God world, and we don't know what that is. That space.
And I was curious about your thoughts. I mean, there's like two things that happen in there regarding the notion of nature. I mean, both he's recording in nature, and it seems just like idyllic. But then also the artist's notion that she had to retreat or sort of heal herself,
Yeah,
or however
yeah.
to put it, in the nature of the Everglades,
Yeah.
which of course is, problematic anyway. But I was curious about, I don't know, if you had anything to speak about, I guess, on that question, and like the notion of nature as it's at least embodied in these artistic practitioners in the film.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, but I think maybe like the artist, I think of it as some sort of salve, space of calmness, and maybe that's like Annie's question about the musician being, like left. He's got this pureness or innocence because he is always in the woods until he's home on the computer, but.
I mean, that's like a big surprise when we come home and he's sitting there on the computer.
Yeah, it's like a detective movie, detective novel. You're like, now aha! Like, it's all, yeah. Right, I do. I mean, I think that, and in both the sort of, Rousseau and also a less naive way, I mean, I do think that the woods or nature is a space that is pretty healing and calming and good to be in. Yeah.
And any other, please?
Yeah.
I guess this is more of a comment than a question, but as I was watching it, I mean, I was thinking about a couple ways I was reading it, and one of which was that like the entire exploration with the artist or with the podcast and her journey in the backyard it was all her speaking to herself and her questioning her own existence and choices to be an artist, and like that is the same level of risk and as a daredevil and like all of these sort of themes, and that the other stuff was just like this conversation she was having with herself.
In the interview?
The interview,
Or the podcast.
with the podcast, but also the interview with the artist were these questions she was asking. The artist were the questions she was asking herself, and she was sort of the works that she wanted to talk about or that she responded to or that she was asking the artist were because those were the works that she was responding to, and so the artist was kind of this projection of the ideal evolved self that she was seeking or something.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's like a romantic comedy, but with no comedy, like a romance, and a total fantasy, that this woman would, have read her story, and that she would, be like the perfect person to ask these questions, and this sort of, and they really continue to understand each other. That's pretty fantastical. It's like a, some purple prose, Victorian novel-esque idea of whether or not there can be true understanding can be sort of attained in a conversation. And one way to think about that is like that sort of solipsistic, like this is just her talking to her.
And she made the comment about like, having a conversation like this, I'm validated that I exist.
Right.
And like, so it felt like it was all kind of a fiction of her.
Yeah.
Self.
Yeah. Yeah. It's horrible. Yeah. I think that in some ways I agree with you. I think about it in that way also. But I think hopefully that I don't know why I feel like I have to defend myself, that somehow like that conversations that we have with other people are both, sort of a projection of ourselves and what we need from these other people. That's, mirror theory, but also there is space for another person. But writing that, can only do so much to separate it. And then when I realized how closely aligned they were and how fantastical that sort of exchange was, I just decided to go with it. Like, it will be like, like in a, dream date in a movie, and then except for that abrupt departure, which is just,
And I think actually at this point we have to, let's
Yeah,
wrap it
thank
up
you
for the
so
evening.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.